Okay, this is the Town Council Town Hall Meeting Room, regular meeting, Tuesday, March 25th, 2025 at 7 p.m. Thank you all for coming. First up, agenda item number 1, the Pledge of Allegiance. Thomas, well, we had you last time, yeah?
Oh, no, I did it 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so Kim, let's go. Pledge of Allegiance. Rise.
Okay, I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let's take the roll call.
Rita Bettino,
Here.
Tom Butterworth,
Here.
Janet Fons,
Here.
Luke Hoffman,
Here.
Mike Morrow,
Here.
Maria Norton,
Here.
Kimberly Norton,
Here.
Hillary Orman,
Here.
Christina Ross here, Eric Tunham,
Here.
Penny Young,
Here.
Jennifer Zonis.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, we'll now call the meeting to order. We actually do not have the Girl Scout troop here, obviously. So we'll move on to agenda item number 2, public comments. Members of the public are welcome to speak to the Town Council on agenda topics scheduled for review and/or vote. Speakers are requested to provide their name and street address, and comments will be limited to 2 to 3 minutes, subject to the total number of speakers. I understand we have speakers in the audience, so thank you. Just pull the microphone close to you so we can hear,
Okay.
and everyone can hear you.
Great. Erica Schwedel, Wells Lane. I come tonight as a taxpayer, a parent, and a community member. First, on behalf of my family, I want to thank each of you on Town Council for volunteering your time to serve our town. It's a lot of work, and you have our gratitude for your service. As you continue your discussion of the town budgets tonight, I'd like to recap the process that the Board of Education's budget proposal has been through so far this year. In January, the superintendent brought forward a budget proposal that was vetted, updated, and unanimously approved by the Board of Education. The Board of Ed's budget proposal for next year is an increase from this year, in part because it includes contractually obligated staff increases that are required by the negotiated teacher contract. As you know, around 85% of the BOE's budget is salary and benefits. In February, the BOE's budget proposal was considered by the Board of Finance and cut by $300,000. This is worth repeating. The budget you're considering right now is already $300,000 short of what our schools need to execute on programs and services for next year. In this context, I come with a request. I respectfully ask that you do not leave tonight without being clear and specific about the size of any additional cuts you are considering making to the Board of Education's budget proposal for next year. Please share with us the specific amount of the cuts that you may make for 3 reasons, so that the Board of Education can shed light on any potential impact of your cuts, so that parents and families can understand the implications of your cuts on programs and services that their children receive, and so that the people of this town have the specific information that they need to come to your public hearing next Tuesday, April 1st, to voice their thoughts about your plans. I look forward to listening to your continued deliberations tonight, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Tia Winery, Woodland Road. Good evening, Town Council members, and thank you so much for your service to our town and the hours you spend on behalf of our community. I am here today in support of the proposed BOE budget. I watched the meeting last week and appreciated the thoughtful questions and discussion you had with Dr. Lutzy and his team. As a parent who has been very involved with the schools, I have followed the budget process for many years now, but I understand that not all New Canaanites, especially those who no longer have kids in the schools, are tuning into the BOE meetings or attending Dr. Lutzy's budget presentations to parents. So you, the Town Council, need to understand how the programs impact the budget and why certain decisions have been made so you can answer to the community. Some of you had questions last week around staffing and headcount. And as Mr. Tunham mentioned, he had received a question from someone in the community on this issue. The quick elevator pitch is the district is delivering services like food, transportation, and maintenance for a better price by bringing them in-house versus outsourcing, as some other districts do. And in my opinion, our district gets better results as well. We could follow other districts and return to outsourcing some services and pay more, but I appreciate that our district has thought creatively in how to deliver services and how to staff our district. Headcount is a data point, but not the only one that tells the story. I'm sure you can appreciate that the educational landscape has changed since some of you have had kids in the schools. Even in the past 5 years, things have changed. In an era of testing optional colleges, APs have become an important way our kids can show how well they are prepared for college level courses. How amazing is it that our high school has been able to increase the number of students taking them and still maintain performance in the tests? We are a community that has shown it prioritizes education as shown in responses in the POCD. I will also note that in many of your campaigns, you spoke about the importance of the schools in our town. We need to make sure that our district continues to be able to support programs like the writing and math centers at the high school, teaching coaches in grade K through 6 to serve our families. Our district leaders and BOE have provided a budget that does that. I hope to see each of you vote to approve the proposed budget that has been approved by the Board of Selectmen and Finance and received unanimous support from our elected Board of Education. They did an amazing job delivering a tight budget that continues to find efficiencies and support the needs of our students and families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Town Council. Thank you for your service and the opportunity to speak. My name is Kristen Jimsky, and I live at 53 Fairview Drive. I am a retired elementary school teacher with a master's in reading and special education and the proud parent of 2 girls here in New Canaan. Like so many people in town, one of the main reasons my husband and I moved 18 years ago was based on the reputation of our schools. We placed our trust in the school system and on a whole have not been disappointed. Our girls progressed through NCPS starting in kindergarten at South School and have taken advantage of what our public schools have to offer, and we have seen the direct benefit in their educational outcomes. While I'm close to the end of my NCPS experience, I still feel it's important to speak up in support of the budget. I'm confused by recent discussions around the BOA budget in the Town Council. I am all for questioning and cutting budgets when there's blatant excess or when the product is not keeping up with the funds allocated. However, currently, this is not the case. The BOA has put together a thoughtful, comprehensive, and strategic plan for all students in the district. Our experts utilize funds tactfully to provide the best possible outcomes at a lower cost per student ratio than many other schools in our area. To my understanding, the role of the Town Council is to listen to our talented experts in their respected fields, debate and ultimately approve major capital needs and appropriations as they are brought forth. It appears to me that any additional operational cuts to the Board of Finance's approved budget would be ignoring the experts and possibly creating unnecessary negative educational impacts. All the while, not even making a significant enough decrease to the overall budget to lessen the tax burden of town residents. As a lifelong Republican, I find it disheartening when necessary operational needs are cut in the name of fiscal conservatism, especially for our most important and vulnerable citizens. Just because you have the power to cut doesn't mean that you should use it. I hope you will trust the experts. I support the BOE budget and feel any additional cuts would be unnecessary for our students and families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith Tobish. I live at 203 Putnam Road. I'll be honest, I'm brand new to town. I've lived here about 9 months, but about 10 years ago, I went on a first date with a man named Mike, and he told me that if I was willing to move back to New Canaan, Connecticut, where he grew up, we could get married. So 6 years ago, we did get married, but I'm a journalist by trade, so I did my research, and New Canaan schools impressed me. I was in education advocacy, and I knew this is where I wanted my future children to go to school. Now Mike and I have a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old who are going to go to South School, and I feel so incredibly lucky to have found a home in a community here already. But when I look at the other districts I was looking at, like Darien and New Canaan, the schools pulled me to New Canaan, and Amelia is only 4. And I'd be sad to see the budget already being cut before she even goes into the school system. Mike's whole family is teachers, and while New Canaan's #1 in so many things, we're only 42nd in spending per student. So I don't think this is the time now when more families are moving to New Canaan for the schools and for our quality of life and our community of being a part of what it means to be a New Canaanite. So I support the budget as is without any cuts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amy.
Good evening. My name is Amy Vizzetti and I live on Carter Street. I am a New Canaan resident with 3 children in the New Canaan Public Schools, and we've had a wonderful experience so far since moving here about 4 years ago. I'm here this evening because last week I listened to the conversation between the town council and Dr. Letzi about the proposed New Canaan Public Schools budget for the next school year. My understanding is that last year, at the end of the process, the town council cut about $250,000 from the proposed NCPS budget, while for many years prior to that, budget cuts had not been made to the proposed budget. So tonight, I wanted to proactively speak up in support of the NCPS budget as it stands. I have great trust in Dr. Letzi, the administration, our Board of Education, who together with the town's Board of Finance have engaged in a thoughtful, well-informed process to arrive at the budget that is being proposed. New Canaan Public Schools is a top performer in the state in terms of academic results, yet our budget remains lower than more than 40 districts within the state. And over the past decade, the district's compound annual budget growth rate has been 2.46%, which is below the official inflation rate of 2.88%. Continually innovating to support our teachers and students who face growing pressure and growing change. Our school staff and administration work hard to keep our schools at a top level, and they offer many valuable programs that serve so many families and students while still being fiscally responsible. Things like the reading program in elementary schools, the math support at the high school, campus monitors, teacher coaching, all things I heard thoughtful discussions about in the town meeting last week, are critical programs and resources that matter to students and matter to parents in New Canaan. Strong schools are good for our community, not only those of us who have children in the schools, but for anyone who lives here. The quality of our schools is a huge factor in our property values, and beyond that, contribute to the wonderful community spirit that so many of us value about living here. Continuing to invest in our schools is essential to New Canaan Public Schools' ability to provide such a high-quality experience that enables our students to learn, grow, and achieve top results. I want to voice my support for the budget as it stands and encourage the town council to please do the same, and in turn, continuing to invest in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Bollinger. I'll keep this really short and sweet for you guys, but I'm a current senior at the high school, and I'm here to speak affirming my strong support for upholding the 2025-26 school year budget that the Board of Finance has recommended. I, like many others in this room and the people who spoke before me, recognize that our schools are our town's top priority. My parents moved here 8 years ago because of our excellent public schools, and I've benefited enormously from the tremendous teachers, programs, and extracurriculars that our schools have to offer. As we've seen time and time again, funding our public schools has shown to be the single greatest investment we as a town can make. And I trust that the experts appointed to the Board of Finance have recommended the best budget possible for our schools, and that we have more to lose from cutting additionally to that budget than we do have to gain. The more we enhance the competitive edge that our town's kids have, the more they will continue to share that wealth back to our community, our state, and our country. So thank you guys for your time and for your service.
Thank you.
Hello, Town Council. Thank you for your service to our community, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Ann Wagner, and I live at 94 Elm Place. I am here to express my support for the proposed Board of Ed budget. I am a former teacher with a master's in education and a parent of graduated NCPS students and of a current student. In summary, the Board of Ed presented a lean budget, and a reduction from here can have unintended consequences to the quality of education and future of our children. Further cuts can negatively impact crucial areas such as classroom sizes, extracurricular programs, and essential student services. These areas are paramount during these highly competitive times. Whether you currently have a student in the school system or not, a quality public school system will always draw quality families and community members. As an example of current competitive times, the college admissions landscape has changed significantly in recent years. College acceptance now seems to rely more and more on students taking extremely rigorous course loads. With over 80% of colleges remaining test optional, students are focusing on the most challenging courses that they can handle. Many colleges now require students to complete calculus before graduating high school, leading to an increase in younger students doubling up on math courses to meet this expectation. While our teachers are incredibly generous with their time, students often struggle to find opportunities outside of class to meet with them and go over challenging material. This issue is especially problematic given that 70% of our high school students are also athletes, making it even more difficult to align teacher and student schedules. The current budget includes a math interventionist, which would allow students to drop in during their free periods to ask questions, sometimes just one or two, but that can make the difference between performing well in an assessment versus struggling due to lingering confusion. Additionally, a math interventionist could push into classrooms, providing targeted support to help students grasp complex material. Furthermore, it is important to acknowledge that our district's math scores have dipped, as have many district scores have since COVID-19. Students generally want to perform at their best, but with the increasing demands placed upon them, they need support from their educators, parents, and community members. Cutting the budget would only make it more difficult for students to receive the help they need to succeed. I respectfully request you prioritize educational resources. Our children certainly deserve the best possible education, and it is our duty to ensure that they have access to the resources they need to succeed. Thank you for your time and consideration. I hope that you fully support the entire Board of Ed budget as presented. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Sorry, I don't have a eloquent pre-written statement, so I'm just gonna go a little off the cuff. Mark Stuntz, I live at 203 Brushy Ridge Road. Everybody else has laid out all the facts and figures. I don't need to go through those one more time here, but I just wanna share kind of my personal feelings. My wife and I moved to this town from California a few years ago. And like everybody else here, we specifically chose New Canaan for a lot of reasons, but probably the most important one is the school system. The rankings are the best in the state, some of the best in the country. Why would you not want to live in a town like that, right? We were looking at Westport, we were looking at Weston, Darien, Greenwich, like everybody else, but we chose New Canaan for the schools. And there's a lot going on right now in the country. The Department of Education is no more. They're cutting funding for Medicaid and all these things. The best investment we can make is in education at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. If anything, we should be putting more money into the schools, not taking money out. I just want to think about that for a second, okay? I have a son in kindergarten at East. It's a wonderful school. I love it, but there are a lot of kids in that school, and so things are falling through the cracks. Taking money out of the budget is not going to help that. And he loves his school, and I want to keep him in the public school system. And we pay a premium in property taxes like everybody else does in this room. And we do so, I don't want to say happily because nobody enjoys writing those checks to the town twice a year, but I do it. And I'm happy to do it because at the end of the day, I know I'm getting a return on that investment from the schools. Please just keep that in mind. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the room that wants to speak can sign up? Is there anybody on Zoom that wants to speak? And if they, okay,
One more
go ahead. And if there's anybody on Zoom, please raise your virtual hand and we'll call on you.
This is not something I typically do. I'm a little nervous. I do not have a prepared speech, but I kind of wanted to second where Mark was coming from in terms of, I moved here with my husband and my children.
Could you just give us your name?
Oh, I'm so sorry. My name is Jen Ellis and I live on Thrush Lane. And I have a 6-year-old at East and I have a 3-year-old in preschool right now. And so this is like a very passionate subject for me. I moved from New York City knowing that everything I was leaving everything there for the school systems here. Like it was my #1 reason for coming here. And I feel very passionate enough to put myself here talking to you, even though I'm nervous. Because I really support the Board of Ed. I trust what I've heard about Dr. Luisi, or sorry, I'm mispronouncing his name, but I really trust that they have our best interest in mind, and I trust the history of the school system here. And I hope that like my daughters can benefit from the same level of success that they've already represented. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Lutzi, and I did the exact same thing a few years ago. So seriously, don't sweat it. He probably remembers that.
See anybody with hands up on the virtual. So I think that might be it.
All right, great. And I would just make an additional, well, #1, thank you, all of you who came to speak tonight. I know it's a little, some people are okay with it. Sometimes people are nervous, so I get it. And I was a newbie in town not too long ago. So also, I just did want to make one point just for the record. You know, we do receive a lot of emails to our town accounts, and I know that everyone up here, and I want everyone to know, we read every one of those emails. We definitely received a lot of emails. That's a relative term, but we received a lot of emails all in support of the budget as been presented to the town council. It's difficult, I think, for all of us to respond to every one of those emails, but I at least wanted it out there that we do read them all. They're not going off into, you know, internet ether, you know, Death Valley or something. We read it. So just wanted everyone to make that clear. Okay, moving on to agenda item #3, budget review and discussion of the proposed town budget for fiscal year 2026, including a review of the following budget and line items. Human Services, 15 minutes, Marcy Rand, and BOE follow-up, 30 minutes, which is going to be longer than that for Brian Lutzi. And we'll start with Human Services. Nancy, floor is yours. Marcy. Nancy. I was making mistakes. What an idiot. Thank you, sorry. I know Nancy ran, that's why I said.
That's okay. Hold on one second. I don't. I'm having a hard time getting. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Marcy Rand. I am Director of Human Services. I will, for your benefit, keep this brief. I will just be touching on, my whole budget is online, as you guys know, so I will just be touching on the financials here. I met with the Health and Human Services liaisons, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, and yes.
Marcy, would you mind pulling that
Pulling
mic
it closer?
closer and just elevating your voice? Thank you.
The whole room needs to hear you.
Who needs to hear me? Hold on one second. I didn't. Guys,
It's okay.
Josh. Oh, Dr. Lutzi, thank you. No, it's not I wish it were the end. I wish it was- Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Anything you can't do.
So if anyone has any questions on, these are our expenditures, everything really we tried to keep flat, if not lower. We did this year ask for 15,000 in our Human Services general assistance. That is because historically about 4 years ago it stopped, but the town did give us money, and we used that for utilities and rent assistance, not really to help sustain families, but just to help families in crisis. And we had quite a large bank of that. So that has been depleted. We have about 15,000 left in that, and we are only halfway through this fiscal year. So we are asking for 15,000. We are hoping that next year we won't have to ask for that. We did just create a donation button. If you guys read Deanna's newsletter, that has been successful. We've gotten a little over $1,500 so far in donations. So that is wonderful. We have a very generous town. And so hopefully we won't have to ask for that next year, but this coming year, we are asking for 15,000. Our human services outside agencies expenditures, they are going to be remaining about the same as what we gave last year, only in sort of a different, we are doing it differently. We are not taking as much from the actual town. We are using some grant money. So the Get About will still be getting 50,000, 25 will be coming from New Canaan, and 25,000 will be coming from a Connecticut Department of Transportation matching grant. So they will still be receiving 50,000. Kids in Crisis, the Teen Talk Counselor for New Canaan High School will be awarded 96,000. 70,000 will come from New Canaan. 16,000 will come from a Youth Services Bureau grant. And 10,000 will come from our opioid settlement. The DVCC will be awarded 10,000. That will be coming directly from New Canaan. New Canaan Cares, their award is 18,000. 5,000 will come from New Canaan. 5,000 will come from our Youth Services Bureau grant. 8,000 will come from our opioid settlement. Meals on Wheels will be getting 5,000, and that will be coming from New Canaan. And the New Canaan Urgent Assessment, they have asked for 40,000 rather than 50,000 this year. They are now starting to accept certain insurances, so that has been great, and that I expect to get lower next year. But 15,000 will be coming from New Canaan, and 25,000 will be coming from the opioid settlement grant. So a total budget for the outside agencies will be 130,000 out of.
So the money that comes from the grants is just, it never goes into the budget and processed through the budget. It's just totally separate.
That I have to ask Anne. The grants are separate, but then they are paid through us. My first rodeo on this one. I'm so sorry. Come sit here.
Just use the microphone.
Any grants that come into actually a separate fund. We have a grant fund specifically for all type of grants that the town gets, and they funnel through there. So any payments would go directly out of that because we have to do a certain reporting at the end of the year for those grants.
Thank you.
And that's it for human services. So if you have
Okay,
any
anyone have any
questions?
questions for Marcy Rand?
Marcy, just a question.
Yeah.
The general assistance, is that for rent or it's for utilities? What did you say that?
That's actually for everything. Like all of the residents that we help does a financial assessment with us. And then they will come to us if they need help.
And you're seeing a greater need for that?
Rent or
in general?
Yeah.
Marcy, a plug for your donation button. What are the categories? Is it like 5 different?
It's 5 different categories. It's most needed. It's utilities, it's DVCC, it's the food pantry. Yeah. And domestic DVCC. Yeah.
Great.
Domestic violence.
That's really nice to do. Thank you.
We're thrilled because it's only been since Deanna put out her newsletter, which I think was like the 19th or so. We're thrilled.
Marcy, how long have you been in the role?
It'll be a year in June. So
Welcome.
thank you. Thank you.
Sounds like you've
I've
got
been
it.
here for almost 5 years as a social worker, but
Sounds like you've mastered all of this.
very, very sweet to say that. That's
And thank you so much because you've done such a creative job of finding ways to keep these essential
well,
programs.
because they are essential, but there are ways that we can not have to take it out of taxpayers. So
We appreciate all you've done.
of
with
course,
that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, so thank you for that presentation. And again, for the community, the value that Human Services provides to this community is no relation to the small percentage of our town budget. It is a
Thank you.
fantastic agency. The services are extremely important. A lot of people use it, and I really hope the entire community understands they can avail themselves of really important services for their life, their family members, to make life better for them, for whatever
Absolutely.
challenge is facing them. So thank you for the work you do in your agency.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, anything else? Otherwise, we'll let Ms. Rand go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, BOE follow-up. Dr. Lutzy, so just as a point of clarification for the agenda, we have it on for 30 minutes, but we're just going to let this move on past that as the conversation progresses to ensure everyone has a fair opportunity to examine the witness, talk to Dr. Lutzy. Move it along, sorry.
Just get hot in here. I feel like the temp went up.
Ceiling.
Good evening. Good to see you guys again. Just want to start, and I said this last time, but I do want to express all of our appreciation for the role that you guys play in being good stewards of our community's resources and being responsible stewards of that. I know it's not an easy job, and we have difficult conversations, and that's why we're all here. But I do appreciate that, and also want to share that we all share the same goal, and that's to serve our constituents well, keep taxes manageable while delivering the best for our community. A lot of the questions keep coming up, and they've been coming up for the last couple of years around staffing, and it's no surprise. And then when Eric mentioned the data that he had pulled the other day, we all kind of sat here and scratched our heads, and I was like, if that's actually true, then I'm not really sure that we did a really good job over the last 4 years, because how did I possibly miss that 350 or some odd 42% increase in staffing in alignment with the budget increase? So we asked Dr. Lutzy to do some investigating, and the numbers that I think you already shared.
Yeah, I'll go
with
through
them. Yeah, we'll go through it together in a little bit. The numbers, as we dug into it, aren't even, they appear to not even be close to the numbers that Eric, that you had pulled, right? And I know that you'd spent some time with Dr. Lutzy as well. So that made us feel certainly better that we hadn't missed anything. But as we dug even deeper, we started to realize that it tells, frankly, an even more compelling story. So it's true that our headcount's grown while student numbers have held steady, but it's not a story of inefficiency. It's a story of strategic choices. And by bringing key services in-house, as have been mentioned before, we've obviously reduced costs in many areas, saving money that would have gone otherwise outside to vendors. And additional staff largely dedicated to meeting growing needs of our students, specifically those with special needs. And again, you'll see that in a little bit as well, really to ensure that every one of our kids has a shot at success. It's interesting, I was reflecting this week, and I would see Les Mis at 7 p.m. showing on Friday with my 3 girls, and the youngest is 6. And the 6-year-old was literally at the edge of her seat right up until the end, and we had to leave until 10:30. And we'd been talking about it and singing Les Mis all weekend. And as a former thespian, I can tell you that I was completely blown away. And I've seen a number of equity productions that don't even compare to what I saw on Friday night. And that doesn't happen by accident, right? It's, as Dr. Lutzy's mentioned, that takes a lot of thought, significant commitment, and it takes resources. So while we all want to save money, everything's more expensive. It might seem easy to say, hey, cut 250, cut 500, cut $1 million. What's it really going to change? But the reality is then we have to go back, sharpen our pencils, and decide, like, where is that cut going to come from? Is it going to come from the 100 some odd extra AP courses that you commented on, Eric, the last time? Is it going to come from special education? Is it going to come from the theater program? I don't know, right? But those are the questions that we all have to ask. And you guys have to ask those exact same questions, right? So we totally get it. But the results are a product of years of hard work, careful planning. And look, we're not here to push back just for the sake of pushing back. But we have already gone through this during our own budget meetings, so we're very comfortable. We've gone through the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance. And, what I would say is we're here to partner with you to figure out a solution to move forward, to make sure that our constituents feel good about the budgets that we all put forth, and that you're balancing the fiscal pressures while also making sure that we keep our product what it's become and what it can be. So anyway, I'll stop talking. Everyone wants to hear you anyway. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Great summary. And thank you to the town council. Thank you to our parents and community members that came out in support of our great work, right? And the gratitude that they expressed, we feel as well. We're very grateful for your commitment to the town, for the partnership that we've had through the years and the work that we've all done together, whether it's Board of Ed, Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and Town Council, to ensure that these investments that we make in our schools yield the best possible results on behalf of children. I think we do that. That's what we do better than anyone else. And I'm proud of that. And I hope that each of you are too. I know we want to speak about, well, first you'll be pleased. I don't have a presentation tonight. And I thought about coming in and yielding my 30 minutes, but I'm not going to do that. But
well played.
But instead, I thought we just one or two clarifying points, and then we'll go into capital, because we did not have an opportunity to talk about capital. Any questions you might have about that, and then we certainly, whatever makes sense for you, but I thought that structure could work. If you look under your agenda, you'll see a sheet with very small font, and I apologize for the size of the font, but it was the only way to get it all on one page. And it does give the details that Hugo was just mentioning about our staffing numbers. And it was a powerful exercise. It is something that we annually do and look at, and I have a spreadsheet that's longer than I care to admit that has all of these data on them. But looking at that 10-year period was powerful because of all that has happened in those 10 years. Really think about all of what we've done, all of what we've experienced, and that's almost an entire cycle for kids as we think about it. It also just happens to be my tenure as superintendent, right, as we look at it. And so the numbers that the dates that we chose were 2014-15 through 2024-25, because in doing this analysis, it was very important for us to use vetted data. And so what we did was go back to use our staff utilization reports. I've mentioned those last week, that we do these annually. These are the audits of our staffing. And we take great pains to be as detailed as possible and counting each and every 10th, even 100th of an FTE sometimes, to make sure we get it as accurate as possible. So if you take a look down, and again, apologies for size of the font, but I'm glad to go into any detail or any conversation about any of this. Something might jump out of off the page for you. We broke it down by certified and non-certified positions. So at the top of the page are the non-certified positions. And as you'll see in 2014-15, we were at 297.11 non-certified FTEs. This current year, 24-25, 10 years later, we have 333.68 non-certified FTEs, for an increase of 36.57. Now, as we looked at where those increases come from, we find that 61%, or 22.38 of those 36.57, are special education related, with the largest number being with our instructional assistants. And those are individuals that work with students every single day who have special education needs as determined by their PPT and their learning needs, right? We also see that the transportation staff has increased by 6.8. And I know we talked about transportation before and about how, while we do carry that staff, it's actually an efficiency because we'd be two times plus if we had to outsource those positions, right? And then we look at the other support services, of which that's where we have our BCBAs, and we've hired 2 of those. We have assistive technology positions and other experts that work directly with kids, that if we didn't have them on staff, we'd be paying a service to send them over, which we then lose the quality control. We lose those relationships. We lose the ability to use those folks and their expertise to train all of our staff. When we insource something like a BCBA, which is a board certified behavior analyst, when we onboard them, they then can work with all of our teachers. So it's not just with the teachers with the students who need those direct services, but they can work with other teachers as well to build their skill set. And we spend less than we would if we were bringing somebody in from an agency. So when we talk about, sort of efficiencies, that's what we're talking about. Now, putting the special education staff aside, we're left with 14 non-certified staff over the 10 years. And of those 14, as you'll see, if you take a look, the majority are in custodians and maintenance. And again, that goes right to what we talked about with insourcing plumbers, HVAC,
other experts so they can do the level 1 service on our equipment. And so we're not bringing other people in. Again, we save money and they also take pride in the work that they do. They do a wonderful job. We also, as you recall, again, over that 10-year span, we expanded Sachs Middle School. So we had to hire additional custodians because of the additional square footage. And now that it's more similar to the high school, we have the same number of custodians at Sachs as we did with the high school. Because again, of the size of that school, because of that addition. So again, there's a logic behind that, and that makes good sense. Now you're left with 7 non-certified FTEs over those 10 years, right? And those again are going to be split. And you'll see also there's some decreases, right? You'll see in the secretarial area, we've decreased by over 5 positions. And we've done that by pooling services and support. Of course, we need secretaries in our schools. I mean, they're the folks that are reaching out to parents. They're the point of contact when somebody comes into the building. So our elementaries each have 2 secretaries in the offices. Our Sachs Middle School has secretaries in the upper and lower division offices. High school has theirs. So of course, we still need that staffing. But where we could combine, and maybe instead of having a secretary for a position, have multiple positions sharing that service. We've done so, and we continue to do so. And so we're down 5.5 positions over the 10 years in that area. And then you see, again, small little, puts and takes back and forth. The other piece is the 2 security. So 10 years ago, we had our campus monitor program. We had 9 campus monitors. Since then, we found the need to bring in a floater. So it's somebody who fills in and substitutes when somebody's out. And we now have a lead campus monitor because we also learned throughout that period of time that we had to be sure that our protocols, practices, and their implementation were consistent across the board. So that lead campus monitor is a member of the Crisis Advisory Board, advises with that group, works district-wide around security, helps to both establish and be sure that the protocols are being implemented with fidelity across all of our buildings. We want to make sure every one of our buildings takes the same approach. And again, these people are highly skilled and trained. And our lead campus monitor is a former detective from New Haven. So coming in to do this work is, we have all of that expertise and a desire and a love of being with kids and community. So it's great. So that's the non-certified piece.
The SROs are in the police department budget?
They are in the budget, and then they're added to our per pupil expenditure in kind at the end. Yep, but they exist in the budget of the for expense, but then we pick it up in that. Okay, so that's the non-cert. Now let's look at the certified for a moment. If we look down there, we've got our 3 elementary schools. And as we've said, it's mostly enrollment driven when we look at these numbers, and you see that. South and West are a bit smaller than they were back 10 years ago. And so they're actually negative. South is down about a position and West is down about 3 positions. Right? And and East is up a bit because East is larger. We have also invested, as you know, in an ELL coordinator position across the elementaries, our classroom coach and the math coach. And so that, because those are split across the 3 buildings, it's a third, a third, a third. And again, that's why we really wanted to make sure we were using the vetted studies that we do every year, those audits of our staff utilization, because we know the detail that goes in the work that goes into building those. So our 3 elementaries, on the whole, are down a little bit, even with those additional positions, as you see, right? Over at Sachs, we've expanded some of the programs there, and we've added some extra support in response to intervention, which is that RTI I talked about. And again, that's the work that we do between when a student begins to struggle and when a student is identified in need of special education services. If we can use this RTI structure to get them back on track, they don't have to progress into special education. They go right back into the general ed, which is the goal if that's appropriate for that child. Again, the EL coordinators included in there, and other opportunities for students that we have at the middle school, including in the VPA and the specials. And then over the high school, you see it's 7.16. And that speaks to the conversation we had about increasing opportunities for students. So when we looked at that, looking at the class size numbers, it was hard to square that circle a little bit because it seems like that's obviously the largest investment we've made in the 5 buildings, and that seems like a larger number. But so we looked at the percentage of students that are enrolled in each of the disciplines, and it shows that as we've expanded opportunities for kids, by creating additional AP classes or articulating with UConn or whatever we've done, more of them have enrolled in those classes. So for example, is in the social studies, because that's the biggest driver. 10 years ago, we might have had 98% or so enrolled in a social studies class. Now we have 110, 111% of our students enrolled in a social studies class because they're doubling up. They're taking more classes because we've provided those opportunities for them. That's exactly what we wanted, what we hoped for. And so the class sizes are still consistent, but we're offering more sections of classes and kids are filling their schedules more. And that's what we're seeing at the high school more than anything else. Of course, we've also added a financial literacy course for every student that every student must take prior to graduation, a semester of financial literacy. So that right there is a full-time position, 1.0 FTE. And in 10 years, again, we've expanded our computer science. I can speak to that 10 years ago because I was the principal of the high school 11, 12, 13 years ago. And we were just starting down that road around computer science and advanced computer science and some of the STEM work that we see now and we just assume has always been there. So those are some of the shifts that we've made at the school by adding programs. So we've added programs, students have signed up for those programs, and we've met that need by increasing staff where necessary. And just for what it's worth, this 7.16 at the high school doesn't mean that there are 7 additional people. Sometimes what we'll do is add an additional class into a teacher's schedule. So it's not necessarily, I know we say head count and we think of that as a person each head, but actually we use FTE, full-time equivalent, because there may be some teachers that are teaching an overload of a class. And so that would be a 1.2 position. So that would be added into the FTEs that way. So, you might say we haven't seen that many new people at the high school, new positions, but it may not be that, right? It's just those additional sections that need to be taught. And then as we go down again, special ed is still the biggest driver. Bill, I had to say it, sorry. But again, that special ed driver is all about the investing in programs, meeting student needs and investing in those programs. So we've mentioned the Literacy Academy. Our downtown 10 years ago launch was just beginning. It was in place, but it was growing. And we didn't have an alternative school. We didn't have a literacy academy. There's some of those things that we, again, take for granted in some ways, certainly the alternative school, because it feels like it's been here forever, but it's only about 6 years old, 7 years old. So,
And launch is now longer, right? I mean, we've taken on, we
It
either
is,
have taken on the
exactly.
responsibility or have a legal requirement to enroll the kids who need launch until they're 20.
Great point. Yep, the legislation changed where it was 21. Now it's the students stay in the program until the end of the school year in which they turn 22. So whether they're with us or if they're in a different facility for whatever reason, they're on our books until the end of the school. So if a student turns 22 in July, that student's with us until June.
The following year.
Correct. Yep. Yep. And we've had some of those already. That just changed. So again, those are, and we, that's one of those things we believe we can do it better than anyone. And we want to do this for our kids and help our kids and allow them and have them in our program. And we want the state to pay its fair share because that's a shifting of the burden. The state used to pick those up. Now they don't. And so I continue to ask our legislators to make us whole on that, make all districts whole. Correct. Yep. And as you'll see, so again, in those 10 years, we've added 21.76 special education positions. And those are the things that we're talking about. It also includes outreach social worker position, speech language, psychologists, what we've had to do in order to meet the increased needs that our students have. Last year, we made that decision to in-house the Kids in Crisis Counseling. And instead of doing that through Kids in Crisis at Saks, we made the decision to hire a social worker instead. That's in those numbers. All of those things add up to that. In leadership and resources, that's where our Dean of Students is. There's additional English language arts over at Saks, but you'll see it's only a 0.4. So again, what we've done, and we talked about this last week, is wherever possible, we've taken an existing position and evolved that existing position into a need that's emerged. And a good example of that is the Dean of Students, which used to be our K-12 health coordinator. There's somebody in that role as a K-12 health coordinator for a while, rewrote the curriculum, did all kinds of great work, met with the community, met with the staff, was serving in that role, and then went part-time Dean of Students, part-time that, and then that position transitioned to full-time Dean of Students, because that was a greater need. And the curriculum was in a place now where it could be handed over to someone who was just receiving a stipend for that role instead of a full-time FTE. So that thinking we try to bring to bear on this, on these decisions all the time. And then if you look down at the last one, central office, you see 3.6. And what that is, again, over that 10 years, it's an additional special education administrator. We changed our structure. We used to have 2 special education administrators. One was K6, the other was 712. And we saw that those were 2 untenable positions, given the demands and the needs of those positions and the leadership. So we shifted it to be 1 at the pre-K through K4, right? So pre-K and K4 was the first shift. And then we had 1 specifically at the middle school. And then the third is grade 9 through launch, right? So we added 1 and reorganized that staffing. After a while, we saw also that the pre-K itself needed some more specialized work and leadership. So we created a position for a 0.6 pre-K director. And so that we took the pre-K away from the special ed administrator who was doing pre-K through grade 4. Now that person does K4 across the 3 buildings, and we have a 0.6 position for pre-K director. That 0.6 position is paid directly through the IDEA grant, right? So this is grant and budget funded positions, all in, because that's how we do our staffing. So we had that. And then the other one, the other 1.0 is the, that's right. One is the director of finance and operations. So that when Dr. Keating was in the role, it was a non-certified role. She had her certification and she had it, but she opted to be in the non-certified position there because of reasons that she understood. And so when Sean came on board, he's working under his 085, which is the school business administrator. So he shifts down to the certified versus the non-certified. That's all that is. And then the other position is the director of innovation, which we added a few years ago, which again was the K-8 science coordinator position. And we took that position, said, well, we'll get more value out of that by turning it into an administrative position. So that becomes K-12. And as an administrator can perform staff evaluations, can be more involved across the district, and we'll do K-12 work. So it's the same person, we pay them a little more, evolve the role, and get an awful lot more work out of it. Which again, just to answer the question about the administrative structure at Saks, it's exactly what we did with the intermediate school over at Saks. So Saks, when it was a 5 through 8 building, one school, there was 1 principal and 3 assistant principals. The decision was made to elevate one of the assistant principals into the principal of the intermediate school, and then to assign one of the APs to that for 5 and 6. The other AP and the existing principal are the team for 7, 8. So it was no new staff. Again, it was a reorg. Because part of it is, it's Jim Collins, right? Get the right people on the bus and then get them in the right seat. And that's what we're always doing as we're doing this work. So again, the majority overall of the increase in staffing, 60% is special education, directly special education. And it's 10.5, 11% overall through the 10 years.
Let's see, there's something weird on this.
Okay.
All right.
What did you say?
Yeah, he's serious. It's a little. Yeah. Okay, good to know.
Yes, thank you.
What do you
Dr.
say?
Lutzi.
Are you concerned about the funding for the 0.6 FTE that's funded through IDEA? Through what?
Through IDEA, right. And not in the short term. In the short term, the IDEA funding is set in the continuing resolution that was just passed. In the longer term, of course, right? Because it's that the funding flows as a block to the state and then it's distributed that way. And we're seeing some things that are concerning in some states and some places. So we have to keep an eye on it. But in the short term, that funding is, I'm told by those I've contacted in Washington, otherwise that funding is secure in the short term. But we're always worried about everything. That's why we don't sleep much.
Is there a greater concern beyond this one position that's funded by the IDEA?
Oh, sure.
Of
So the
How
IDEA,
much do we usually get from the federal government? And is
Mhm.
there a concern in particular for this budget that we're considering now? And then going forward?
so there's not, there's always some concern, but there's not, it hasn't elevated to strategizing the solution yet, right? Because we are confident enough that the funding will flow this year. There's a page in the budget book that breaks down all of the grants. Essentially, the largest grant we get is IDEA. And IDEA is the only grant that is meant to supplant your budget meaning that it's supposed, you're using it to run your program, right? So I think that helps to protect it too in those decisions. We get about $1 million of the IDA. And we use it primarily for staffing because that's what it's meant for. So it's supplanting the budget. Those are staff members that if without that money would have to be in the budget because we need them to run our program to meet our students' needs under the special education program. Most are TAs, right? So teaching assistants, and there are a couple of certified staff members as well, including that 0.6 for the preschool.
Okay, that's helpful to know.
The money that, or the funding that we are unsure about is Title II funding, which is professional development, staff development money. For the most part, it's continuous improvement money. We get about 70,000, give or take, with that annually. And that's something that wasn't guaranteed in the continuing resolution. So we're just keeping the closest eye on that.
Can you,
And-
can you
and E-rate
define?
might be
oh, sorry.
challenged. I'm sorry.
Can you define IDA grants for us?
It's
It's Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA, and that's the federal, right, that is the law that governs special education in the way we do. So we use, that funding is meant specifically to help fund special education.
It's
The original
it's the law
IDEA,
that says that every child is entitled to a free and appropriate public education. It's FAPE, right?
Yep. And originally, when it was written and passed, the federal government committed to funding 40% of the expenses that were incurred as a result of IDEA. And I believe the highest they've gotten is 7.
Okay.
Rita, go right ahead. You,
Great. Yeah, no, thanks. I had to get myself off mute. And we discussed this in the committee meetings that, so thank you for bringing that up again. But can you remind folks like the timing for that? Because I think you mentioned we really wouldn't know if there was any loss until like October, right? Weren't you saying October is sort of the timing that you would have a better idea, or did I remember that incorrectly?
No, you remember that correctly. And that's where the continuing resolution goes past that, right? So which is why we're not overly concerned in the short term around the largest funding source. It also is, it's a 2-year grant. So you carry a portion into the future and you spend as you're going. So there's some carryover each year that you can use as well. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. But yes, correct, that it's not something we have on July 1st. It does take a little bit of time.
Thanks.
And did we get any state funding in the form of ECS grants or anything? Are we anticipating to get a chunk of like the 40 million that has been earmarked for SPED, or do we, I understand that there's like a multiple that you have to hit to qualify for state funding, and it typically goes to other districts.
Sure. So what you're referring to is the excess cost grant, which is the same year special education reimbursement grant, which is for students that cost more than 4.5 times the per pupil expenditure. And it's the delta from 4.5 times up, a percentage of that is reimbursed by the state. Because of a miscalculation in the budget a few years ago, the number that they had in the budget in Hartford was lower than it had been in years and lower than what districts had planned for or had expected. So the 40 million that was approved just really right sizes that. So and it goes right into that pot. So that's the funding that comes back to the district based on our expenditures around 4.5 times above. And what we have a great arrangement with the Board of Finance in the town that funding flows directly to the town. And where most school boards and superintendents net that out of their budget, our ask is our gross amount. That's what we expect and need to pay. And then that funding flows directly to the town, and they're able to book it as income against expenditures. And so if there is a significant cost overrun in that line of outplacements, then we're able to access that funding and it protects the rest of the budget. So something we did years ago, it served us well. Generally, we're okay without it. But there is something also called ECS. So the terrible acronyms, they're too close. Right? And ECS is educational cost sharing. Right. That's where the legislature, the government, the state picks up a portion of the cost to run the school system in each town. That for us is usually of the tune about $275,000, give or take. It's a very small portion. And that again flows directly to the town as an offset against our expenditures.
Thank you.
Dr. Litzy, has our SPED population been increasing over the last 10 years? And do we have any sense of where that's going in the future?
Sure. You know, throughout the DERG, throughout the state, everywhere that population is on an increasing trajectory. I think that ours has been increasing. That's the prevalence rate on the chart that we looked at last week. We were here. When we look around, we see that our prevalence rate is lower than the state, lower than our peers, lower than others. And to that, I credit the response to intervention program that we have and all of the supports that we provide to kids, sort of in between struggle and identification. But those numbers do tend to increase year to year. Where's it going? Following the trajectory, I think it's going there slower for us than most, but those numbers do increase. They do tend to increase year to year.
The outplacements put pressure on the budget. And do we have any sense of how many outplacements we've saved by keeping in district?
We do. Again, there's been a downward trend in our total numbers over the last couple of years. In part because of the programs that we've been developing, the Literacy Academy and others. There's a couple of different sort of categories of this, right? Our outplacements are students that we don't have the program for here. So maybe it's a extremely fragile kid with significant medical needs that needs 24-hour-a-day care for something. This is hypothetical. This is why I answer it, not Bill. He knows too much. And so that student we may need to outplace. And so we work with the family, we find the right facility, and we outplace and do that. Those are going to be what they are, right? No matter what programs we develop, we're not going to have programs that can meet that level of need for a child. The others are folks that believe that we don't have a program when we think we do. And that conversation then flows to a mediation type environment, and we work through that. That's where building programs in-house significantly help us to keep our kids here, where we think they get the best education around.
This is a really helpful chart. Incredibly, I think incredibly helpful. Sorry, you're on my blind side, so I can't.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. So
Okay, go ahead.
this question may sound a little crass and cynical, but I know that we do the special ed because it's the right thing and it's effective and it's great for the community. But is it also true that we have to do it by law? Are there a lot of these FTE growth numbers that are attributable to mandates?
Many, for sure, many. For instance, 2 additional pre-K teachers and the corresponding special education teaching assistants are there. Pre-K is a mandate for us for students. So certainly the majority are mandated through whether it's student needs in the district, other programming. And then there are some that we've chosen to invest in, like the Literacy Academy or Launch. So there are districts that don't have a transition program. And so what they do is they pay someone else to run their transition, for their children. We have 2 students from another district in our Launch program just this year. Right. And they're paying tuition and coming through, and they're having a great experience, and they'll be with us again next year. And that's, so those are the things that we choose to do because, again, it's best for the child, and it happens to wind up being best for the budget. So there's a balance, but the majority is the mandate, is mandated.
And is that a cost that comes from one school district to another?
It is. Yep.
So it's like they're outplacing to us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of the things we've been talking with legislators about is incentivizing districts to build programs, creating grant programs for districts that either have programs that they'd like to expand or want to start new programs, right? Because we do believe, I believe, that there's a wonderful opportunity here for each of us to create programs like Launch and Alternative, others that they may each be a little different, and we can do some sharing of students. So if another district has a program that is best suits one of our kids, and we have the one that best suits one of theirs, we can do some of that swapping and trading and benefit from each other's expertise.
Go ahead, Maria.
I just want to talk about the turnover savings. What exactly is the amount in the budget for turnover?
Sure.
If you could just, I thought I saw 245.
45.
And last year, or I guess this current year, it's 450. 45 reflect, like how many people do you estimate? Over?
We generally, on retirements, the savings that we've experienced tend to be anywhere 34,000, give or take. on average per retiree. That's a study we did a few years ago. I haven't updated it, but I think it probably would hold. The labor market has gotten tougher. So we do find ourselves hiring folks with more experience at sometimes, but also there are fewer people and sometimes we're bringing brand new folks. So there's a balance there. So generally it's about 34,000 per retiree that turns over. And then you have just regular turnover that can happen. One of the reasons we're a bit more conservative this year on that number is we onboarded 51 new teachers last year. So that was a big year. And typically, if you have a year like that, folks that were thinking about it that maybe would have held on for another year, they made the decision to go. So that's what put us where we are.
So if that number were, say, what it is this year, that would change your budget request by that much. Say if you increase that turnover number.
Sure, if we had more savings there.
Right.
That's part of the calculus as we put all of it together. So when we look at the funds that have been returned to town, that some of those certainly could come from some turnover savings that we didn't build into the budget.
Because my view is we're not cutting the budget. We're trying to find a balance between the request and what we think you could ask and or approve. And like Hugo, you mentioned last year, the reduction. Did that result in any elimination of staff or AP courses or special ed programs?
No, it didn't.
Because I feel like our role's a little bit to push. So I think, that's why I'm looking, I know the elementary coach coming in is meant to coach newer teachers. So presumably we're going to have more I think you even said that. We may have more newer teachers because there's so many at the higher end. So is that a number that could be adjusted so that it could, have an impact on the request? Just a thought.
Can I ask, since we're talking, and maybe this is jumping the gun, but in the interest of efficiency and time and the fact that we're talking about headcount and operating budget, I do think it would be helpful, like Ms. Schwedel said, and like Mr. Alves said, if there is a proposal to reduce their proposed ask, that it be put on the table. Like
That question was pretty clear.
No, but what amount? I mean, I think that they
200,000 right there on that line.
So
to
just
match.
that, so is that an amount that you would?
We can't say.
No, of course not. You can't line it. We
the
can't
same
line it.
discussion
No, I
every
understand. We do it every year, but is there a number that is being considered? Because there's a lot of information floating with the public. I think that there's anxiety about numbers that have been floated. I think there's imprecision. I think we owe it to the Board of Ed and to Dr. Lutzy and to the parents here to have that discussion, because we're sort of nibbling around the margins of that discussion, but not having that. So I appreciate your clarity about
to
that.
clarify, will there be staff cut? Like I'm reading some of those comments and they paint a dire picture. And I don't think we ever go there, even if there is a reduction. So I think we have to be honest with where these adjustments can be made and what the true impact will be. I don't think we've ever laid off staff here. I don't know in the time that
But I think it has to do with the order of magnitude for whatever reduction is being proposed. If there is a consensus on this day is that $1 million needs to be cut, like Brian can't answer that question without understanding the order of magnitude of proposed cuts. Like you cannot possibly predict whether you need to do layoffs if you don't know how much, that's all I'm saying. I think, again, we're sort of avoiding that question, and it's a critical one. It's absolutely essential. So if somebody has a proposal, I think we put it out there.
We'd like just to speak to that. So the Board of Finance recommended or requested a 500 to 700,000 cut. That did not come from the town council. So taking guidance from the Board of Finance, I don't have a specific number in my head at this point. If we do decide to reduce, I don't have that number, but I'm just saying that we were handed a baton from the Board of Finance. It said, please cut, or they asked 5,000 to 7,000 to be cut. I think 300,000 was cut between 140 and 160, right?
I
after the
just
Board
want to
of
interrupt. It
Finance.
was three
Can
to
you just
five.
stop for
It was 3 to 5, though, just to get the number correct.
No, it was 500 to 700,000. I've watched all the meetings of the Board of Finance.
Awesome.
And so then My understanding is the Board of Ed came back with a 160 from a teacher retirement perhaps, and then a 140 from the ISF, which adds up to 300,000. So, we've been handed a baton, so to speak, but I don't have a specific, I know, well, you may disagree, but you can watch the meetings and that was what was said. That's a factual
No, they
thing.
approved a budget and sent it to us. They didn't say, now you guys go cut more. That's not at all what happened.
Well,
So
you
I
can
don't want to
mince
revise
words, but that
history.
was discussed in the meeting, but you're the one asking for a number, and I'm just saying that was some direction. So I'm trying to provide some clarity
Okay.
to your request. So.
So what number? Like, what's the number, guys?
There's no number.
Respectfully, what I would like to say is that I watched all those meetings as well, and my recollection is that in that process, and the same thing last year, Todd Levier said, in speaking to you, you're presenting us with this. Could you take a look at it? And how about something in the range of 3 to 5 was what I interpreted it to be. So I think what Hillary's saying, and in answering to what Erica proposed at the beginning, is if there is some consensus among you of what the next round would be, now would be the time to hear what the idea is.
To give them an
Not just
opportunity
like
to.
an
respond.
amorphous.
And if there isn't a number.
So when are you planning on presenting it in this process?
We don't know. This is the Q&A portion of the meeting.
We need to have a discussion now about it.
Well, I don't-
It can't happen how it happened last year.
I do not think that anybody here is ready to make a motion for a specific proposal. I have seen it, let me finish, please. I don't think anybody's ready to make a specific motion and have a vote on a proposal at this point. However, I am informed, as Kim is, that the Board of Finance wanted you to think in terms of around a $500,000 reduction in the increase. And I want to be perfectly clear. No one on this dais is advocating a cut in the Board of Education budget. You've come to us with a 4% requested increase. You're going to get an increase from last year. There's no question about that. What we're struggling with is what is the appropriate size of that increase. Somehow, information got to members of the community who sent emails to town council suggesting that town council was either considering or had already decided upon a $500,000 reduction in the level of the increase to the BOE budget for this year. That number has not been decided upon, nor has it been proposed directly by anyone up here yet. Are there any people up here who are thinking in terms of that being a good number? Sure. I'm sure there are. I think that would be a good number. And I shared that with you yesterday in our meeting.
Is that a 500 total, like 300 plus 200? So the 200 would be our directive, or are you saying 500 in addition
I'm
to what the
saying
board? of
we're
Finance-
given this budget total request of approximately $114 million. And what I'm saying, just to go on record and be out there, I'm saying it would seem to me that Dr. Lutzy and his team could find $500,000 of administrative cost savings within that $114 million budget, such that it would not impact student outcomes and reductions in programs. I do not advocate any reduction in student programs. I don't. It's an absolutely outstanding school system. And I'm proud of it. And I want to support it. And I'm fully in favor of an increase in the budget year after year after year, because at least we have to keep pace with inflation. We have to hire teachers at competitive salaries, and we have fabulous teachers and fabulous programs. What I'm struggling with, and maybe some others up here are struggling with, is that the current rate of inflation is below 3%, and we're looking at a 4% increase request. I wish things were a little closer. For hundreds of reasons they can't be, and you're the expert on all of that. I am not. But there's a number, okay? I'm not making an official proposal. I'm not making a motion. That's where I'm thinking. And I've, from, as I said last week, in the meeting when you first presented, there are things I scratch my head at about, you've provided answers to my questions, and I really appreciate that. But there are things I still scratch my head at in terms of the administrative staffing that we have. And is there a way to lower the amount of the requested increase?
Thank you, Eric. Anybody else want to comment? I do want to finish up Dr. Leslie's presentation, then we can revert back to this if there's more, because we do have to hit capital. So
No,
do
I know.
want-
I'm sorry. I
So
really
what-
wanted-
one-
I just wanted to ask.
I'm glad. Jennifer, go ahead.
Quick clarification, and I think Hillary alluded to it, and I ask it neutrally, just trying to understand that. And I think there was a discrepancy with whether the Board of Finance had taken out 160 from the ask or a total of 300. But is this idea of the 500, is that an aggregate from what was originally came out of Board of Selectmen, or is that in addition to what has already been taken out?
I think from a taxpayer's perspective, the more that comes out, the better. Okay, I don't know whether I'm not ready to say I want to see an additional 500 beyond the 160 that was reduced at the Board of Finance level, or whether it's the best motion now to say we should reduce the increase by an additional 340 to make that aggregate 500. I'm arguing
I just
in-
want to
with
add to
myself
get
about
the
that.
numbers straight, and Dr. Lutzy, correct me if I'm wrong, or Sean, it's 300 total came out of the budget from the Board of Finance, not 160, not 140, it's 300 total. The budget request from the Board of Ed was 4.67% increase. Now I believe we're down to 4.4%.
Correct.
So it's not 4%, it's 4. So I just want to keep the
300,000
numbers
has been
straight when we
removed.
have this discussion. So it's important.
711 in capital.
Yes, plus 711 in capital. We're talking about operational, right? So I just wanted to get those numbers straight.
And Eric, I want to say that I appreciate you saying where your head is, because I think that's incredibly helpful. Just throwing out the hypothetical, if we were to say 500 off this 114 that is coming before us, what would that impact? And you can think about this and come back to us, or, you know, is it true that you could do a cut like that, or excuse me, reduce the ask? Let's be clear. You could reduce that increase by 500,000. Do you foresee that impacting programming for students? Is there enough administrative costs, to Eric's point, that isn't covered by contractual salary and benefits? Right? Because 85% of your budget is salary and benefits, is that right? In that 15%, is there $500,000 of wiggle room or not? I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at here. I'm trying to come to.
One of the challenges always, and I really do empathize with the town council because of this, the way the process works, right? So we've already looked at it. We've developed a budget. We've scrubbed through it with the Board of Education. The Board of Selectmen has had an opportunity for some feedback. The Board of Finance has looked carefully and scrubbed through it. And now, we're saying, so is there a $500,000 item somewhere that we could reduce without it impacting? There's not, right? We've never had a number like that in turnover savings, right? So that when we're talking about numbers like that, I can't.
Putting you on the spot.
No,
so-
I won't be. I can't get specific, right? But there would have to be a reduction somewhere.
I think this just begs the question, though. I mean, do we simply want to fund the schools at the rate of inflation, or do we want to invest in certain things that, our administrators are thinking we are important? Like the classroom coaches and interventionists. It's just a fundamental question.
Thank you. I have to get to Rita. She's had her hand up for a little bit. Go ahead. Sorry, Rita.
I just have a clarifying question with like the rate of inflation question, because if 85% of the budget is salaries, but I believe that 90% of the increase is due to salary, right? And benefit increases. So I guess my question is the salary and benefits, did they go up with inflation or more than inflation? Just curious, like how much did they go, how much did the salary and benefits?
I would tell you that, so in New Canaan, salary and benefits is about 80, varies anywhere from 81 to 83% of the budget. And
Right.
salary and benefits combined exceeds the rate of inflation.
That's what I'm at. So really, then that was a question I wanted answered. So
So
if you
Rita,
took-
so like health
go
insurance is a
ahead.
big driver of that, right? So health insurance trends are 6+% annually.
Got it.
And so that is always going to be more than the rate of inflation.
Right, so
Not
so
inexpensive.
we're really talking, even if we wanted to maintain inflation on sort of the other spending, it would be more than what inflation is. That's what I'm just trying to get to.
Well, and actually there's another exhibit, and I'm sorry that you're not here to have it in hard copy, but the other exhibit that we did put at your tables tonight does a quick analysis looking at our actual spends over using the year 2015 to 2024, so we could get the actuals versus a proposed or an adopted. The actual spends are actually below the rate of inflation through that span of 10 years by about 0.41% by point, which or compounded through the years turns out to be about $6.6 million below inflation had we moved each year at that inflation rate. So now, because one of our challenges, and this is why I was an English teacher, so I'm on dangerous ground here, but one of the things about budgets and inflation, the way that this works is it's a lagging impact on school district budgets because our budgets are approved so far in advance. So if you look statewide, and even if you look throughout our region, mid-4s is the norm for budgets and where they are, because the inflation that hit back in 22, 23, 2021, that inflation, as it was compounded, our budgets were set in those years. So we're just trying to sort of normalize and equalize around that a bit now. And all of us are in that same boat, right? So even though inflation is down, and I hope it stays that way, we're still trying to catch up because the budget we approved back in 2020 for 2021 was not 4.7. And in 21 for 22 was not 8%. And for 22, 23 was not 4.12. So that's where the inflation in the budget, it's a bit of a lagging impact on us because of the way the cycle works. So it's just important to note that, again, we're not an outlier for sure. I mean, there's some budgets in surrounding towns at 10%, trying to catch up with some of that with, trying to make some hard decisions around that. And some are running in the mid upper 5s. I don't think I've seen anyone in the 3s, perhaps Weston. But this is a tough year for that reason. In part, we have some good fortune. We're hoping to get better numbers around our insurance. And so as the town council knows, what we've done through the years is that's the one place that can change, right? So the budget itself, without the insurance, where we are, you've got in front of you, but we continue to monitor that very, very closely. So if the month experience improves over 12 months a year ago, so February didn't improve, unfortunately. Hopefully March does. And if it does, we're able to take that savings because that's a real number that when we do our projected anticipated expenditure around the insurance. And that's based on 12-month look back on actuals.
I have a question. Someone next?
Make a comment about that. That's exactly the kind of assumptions I think we can relook at. I'm looking at, I think this is 23, 24, where it looks like you made different assumptions on certain things and that's how you found the reductions. So my goal is to ask that be part of coming to the final request number. I mean, I don't think we can decide. We can only ask that, the administration finds efficiencies or areas where, adjustments that can be made to bring that percentage down.
Yeah.
One of the questions that was asked in the questions that were submitted from town council was the difference between actual and adopted budget.
Yes.
And that you gave us a nice chart on that going from 2014 all the way to 2024. And the average variance was almost 700,000. So So basically, I just want to explain to everyone here, so there's, I mean, you could probably explain it better, but you put forth your budget and then what you actually spend, there's that delta in there that you then turn over and give back to the town. Is that,
Correct.
am I correct on that? So could you maybe just kind of give us some light on, for instance, 23, 24, about 550, 100,000 was given back to the town. Where do those numbers, where do they come from? And in 2019, it was 2 million. 2020, it was 1.3 million. So there's a big difference depending on the year between what you're projecting as your budget and then what you actually spend. And it does get turned over to the town. But what's that delta? Is it different every year, or what is that?
Well, I'll start by speaking directly to 2020 and 2021.
Mhm.
Those were the COVID years. So in 2020, we shut down the building and all that was the money that was not spent, right? And that was turned back. In
Right.
2021, we were reopened and running, but we didn't run our athletics. We didn't run BPA. There were other programs we didn't run. We didn't have transportation costs around that. So that's the savings in those 2 years. I'm sure there were other sort of puts and takes, but that's the driver there, right? In those two things. So if you normalize those out, you're somewhere high five, low 600,000, right? And so as a Board of Education, boards of ed don't build contingencies into our budget. There is no contingency. Town budgets run a little bit differently, that they can have a contingency. And if they do get in trouble somewhere, they can go to the Board of Finance, who can transfer money out of the fund. For us, for Board of Ed, we have a single appropriation. We have to live within that appropriation. And if we're unable to, for some reason, then we have to go to the town for a special appropriation. So it's not a transfer out, it's a special appropriation, right? And that requires approval of Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, Town Council, can go to referendum and is significantly different. And that's the right system in my mind, because the way that the Board of Education's budget is managed, when it's approved, it's a single appropriation that comes to the Board of Ed, and then we take it and work on it from there. So it's our responsibility to work within that appropriation, and we take that very seriously. Now, there was a year, as you see, in 2019, that it was zero, right? So we needed everything that we had, and we did what we have to do. And there certainly are plenty of other districts that work hard to try to make every one of those years a zero, right? We're not one of them, because I don't believe in that, right? Because that's part of the trust, I believe, that each of you and the community and everyone puts in us, that we run as lean as we can. We present a budget as tight as we can. And then if there are opportunities for savings, it could be, often it comes from staff, because that is the majority of our budget. And it could be long-term leaves that we didn't anticipate. So if people go out on FMLAs that are longer than there could be some salary savings there. Sometimes there's things that come, like, which is built into this budget. It may reflect a savings in our current budget, where our propane costs, we renegotiated the contract for propane for our buses, and now it's down because of the renegotiation plus the grant that we applied for. We're paying around 67 cents, 69 cents. I need to get it right, per gallon, right? Which is incredible. And we only pay for the miles where kids are on the buses, right? So like, that's a savings we'll realize this year, that if there's money that can turn back, that will probably be a part of it. But I'd have to look deeply into it. We do provide all the town boards, and we start with the Board of Ed, on September 1st, the unaudited budget report. And in that budget report, we look at each of the 8 objects, take a deep dive on all the expenditures, any remaining funds, any transfers that are needed, and really write a narrative that's several pages long that sums up our budget performance through the course of the year. And that's where you would get that level of granularity that you're talking about. But it can be opportunities that come up throughout the year. Sometimes a fuel cost comes down. Sometimes there's other pieces. Sometimes we anticipate a savings for some reason, and maybe that savings is greater than we anticipated. Our fuel costs, as we saw, and then one of the slides, I think last week, our utility costs are lower today than they were 10 years ago. Like, that's pretty unusual. So we're always, we want to be cautious as we go and budget that, but we found some savings there in our actuals through the years because of the work that we're doing. So it's an accumulation of many little things that can add up.
It's variable.
It is.
It's not something necessarily that comes out of the same pot. I think I asked you that last week. That is there a sort of consistent theme in where these savings come back to the town? And I think the answer was that it was variable
It is.
year to year, so it's hard to predict.
It's variable on both sides too. So we have expenses that we don't anticipate. For example, we had the kiln fire at West.
That's right.
Costs over $100,000. The insurance company covered everything except for 25, so we had to kick in 25,000. We didn't have that budget. So it's relatively small relative to.
But then we're doing it in evaluations of every kiln in the district. We're looking at all of that, like it triggers another expense around, making sure. So that's true. That's a good example.
Eric, sorry.
Thank you.
had his hand.
I just want to say, first of all, I didn't have access to all the numbers that you've presented here. And I looked online and I couldn't find the 2015 staff utilization report or anything prior to 2019, in fact. So I had incomplete data. I did my best with the data I had to present to you what I thought the compound annual growth rate was. And I still, Sean, you and I need to sit down and talk and figure out the numbers because we're off.
I drafted a memo back to you, but let's get together and go through it.
So I don't have all the numbers you have. None of us has all the numbers you have.
Sure.
I'm looking at the return to town section and lo and behold, the number the last 2 years has been right around or a little more than that 500,000 that we've been bantying about here and that nobody has actually proposed as a motion. So I'm not asking you for a motion or a proposition.
I can't make one.
No, I know you can't. But let me ask you this, and I can't imagine your answer would be no. Will you do all in your power with your team to move toward that sort of a result and be able to, at the end of the fiscal year, return to the town some portion that may or may not approach 500,000?
Oh, yeah, I think our record speaks for itself. We absolutely would.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just, I look at the same column that we're talking about and I think it's fascinating. I mean, it tells a very positive story of good faith, but it also tempts one to say, well, hell, why don't you just spend that money and let's stop arguing about it? Factor it in from day one. And my understanding from listening to you guys through the years is that you need to make commitments to contracts with employees and buses and the whole thing. By the time you get part of the way into this year, everything is committed. So you'd be paying Russian roulette if you said, I can go ahead and make commitments that take into account that 500,000 or 700,000, whatever you want to pick, to take that into account, I'll go ahead and promise that money away. You can't do that, right?
We cannot overspend our appropriation.
I don't think anybody's saying that.
One of my fellow board members just reminded me that we are all on the hook for that as well, as board members. By statute. So I don't have much of a mortgage, so I guess I could mortgage my house, but I'd rather not end up there, candidly. So
that is the
Thanks, Eric.
Connecticut statute is that if a Board of Education overspends its budget, that the board, those individual board members can be held personally liable for that amount.
D&O insurance for you guys?
No, it's on the books. It hasn't happened. Nope, it hasn't happened, but it is on the books, and we hope it never does.
Great question. There's no D&O insurance for you guys? Man, I would put all of my assets out of my name into a trust or my wife's name.
More of an LLC.
so much faith in you guys. I'll lose sleep over that, so we're good. As long
You can
as-
come live with me, Hugo. I got, just in case it goes south.
And it's the primary reason for many years we've had such impassioned discussions about the reserve on our insurance, because that's included in this too. And that's why the Board of Ed has always felt so strongly that those reserves need to be where they are.
Including the health insurance.
Yes, it's all included in one, because although we do it a little differently in the books and the approval, the state sees that all as, it's one appropriation that comes to the Board of Ed.
We do need to keep it moving. It's already, 8:35. We've been at this for an hour. Can we just move to capital? I'm happy to have more discussions on this particular, because it's the big cake that we want to talk about, but let's hit capital.
Great. And if you have your budget books, we can turn to. Let's see. Probably best to do 105. Want to do 105?
Yeah, 105.
105? Okay. And I'm always accused of underselling capital only because I get so excited about operating. This is what we do. But this is also such an important dimension of the work. And we did make some, I think, some tough but correct decisions with the Board of Finance and reducing a little over 700,000. What you have, they don't have the reductions, right? They have the Board of Ed. Okay. Glad to talk to anything specifically. There was an approach that we used this year that was a little different than years past in that for our 3 elementaries, we focus on anything that was health and safety, but not beyond that. And so there's not very much at all for our 3 elementaries, as you'll see in here. If we look at the top with a district-wide, we've reduced that painting number down to 120 with the Board of Finance, and that really would be focused at the high school and over at Saks.
What page are you on?
In your budget book?
Maybe it sits in the back.
Oh, okay. This is 120.
You've got your own book there.
Christina, that's the town book, not the Board of Ed book.
It is also on the slides that I shared. And actually, the numbers are on those slides. So if you have the slides with you, you could use that too.
I'm sorry, it wasn't Josh, it was Brian who gave us this last time, the slide deck handout.
I don't think I even brought my slide deck. I think I was afraid to.
Not even allowed in the building.
Let me see if I have it. Anyway, we could talk to a couple of items on the capital and move right through. Oh, perfect. Oh, thank you, Jim. Why don't you keep that one out there? Okay, so if you do have the slide deck, I did update those numbers. And again, it's the capital. So our total capital ask across the facilities is 3.245 million. There are a couple of big drivers in that. The biggest being the classroom audio enhancement /PA /security system that we talked at length with the Board of Finance about, and I'm happy to talk here, but if you saw that, they said that I had a second career as a salesman for them if need be. So we can go back to that clip if that's helpful. But long and short of it is a very robust system that will have a positive impact in every classroom across the school each day and be available for the PA and communications and be part of our safety network throughout the school. Without going into too much detail about that. Again, I'm glad to answer any questions around it. But that's the biggest driver. We did make the decision, I know the town council is aware of, to remove the scoreboard at Dunning from this capital request and to fund it out of this year's through, I think it was bonded. The school is helping and funding that. Some of the school groups are looking at what they can do. And so that'll be another example of a nice public-private partnership between the two. So that reduces the initial ask a little bit. And then we've reduced some of the initiatives that are here, ceiling tiles over at Saks and a few other things. But it really, the facilities capital has been scrubbed and is pretty tight. There is a security booth in there for the high school. Which is to move the booth that's falling apart where it is now and move it actually in the middle of the road there so it can control traffic flow a little bit better for kids as they're coming and going, and a few other things. Again, I don't want to just talk about what each of these are because they're pretty self-explanatory, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Is there anything you want to highlight?
At Saks, the second elevator is being refurbished. That's $280,000. Phase 4 of the floor replacement at Saks is $250,000. At East, playground rubber surfacing for $250,000, very expensive. Let's see.
Over at Saks, there's the replacement of that rubber flooring in the playground, which has been cracking and is a hazard for kids.
How old is that?
10 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like.
It's time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's lifespan.
Is there any initiative to do rubberized surface at South? And I only ask because I'm happy to see it coming to East, particularly since my son goes there. But it's also just it's not accessible for kids and mobility devices to go on the wood chips or whatever is the surface. So Is there a plan to make all of the playgrounds accessible?
There is. So one of the things we've been talking about is as playgrounds are refurbished and rebuilt, as you know, the PTCs have been major contributors to those efforts. And so our conversation has been that the district, the board would pick up the rubberized surface because that is very expensive. As you see, it's $80,000 to do this. And the PTCs would be purchasing the equipment. So we've had that conversation. New legislation also was passed that says any playground that is renovated after July 1 of 2025 must have that rubberized surface. So because it's a requirement, we feel that we should build it into our budget so that the PTCs can fundraise for the piece of equipment.
And you said that's as of July of this year?
25.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
The PA system, was that sent out for bid or how did that come about? Did I miss that? Did you say?
That's an estimate right now, and we would throw it out to bid to be sure. The company does have some proprietary equipment and software that's available there, so we have to see, is it a sole source or not? But it is a system, although we would be the first in Connecticut to be using it, it's in, some part of this is in 40% of the classrooms nationwide through this company. And the uses, as I mentioned, the 3, and there's a 4th that they're just releasing now that actually for our international students allows them to listen through a set of headphones plugged into a Chromebook or laptop, and it's real-time translation for them. So they can actually hear it in their native tongue. And then if they participate in class, if they speak into the mic or actually into the mic of their headphones, it'll come through the speakers in the classroom, translated back into English from their native language. So for international students, it's a great boon for them as well.
Can I have you go back for 1 second to replacing the rubber flooring at the playgrounds? When you put in the budget 80,000, does that mean that it's 80,000 the total cost, or is that just a portion and waiting for fundraising to kick in too?
That 80,000 is the total cost,
Okay.
and that's a replacement. And you'll see the east playground, although it's not bigger, is quite a bit more than that because that includes all of the drainage and other work that has to happen. But because it's a replacement, just the resurface, it's less.
So how does the fundraising interact with it?
Sure. So if and when the PTCs are fundraising to replace, say they're just going to replace one of the playgrounds,
Right.
Then they would do their fundraising to buy new equipment for that playground. And when they're ready, we then would build into our budget the funding just for that rubberized surface.
Okay.
Where we have to do it at Saks because that surface is old enough that it's cracking and it's becoming a hazard.
I understand that,
yep.
but
there's-
what we're carrying is the replacement cost. The fundraising would go towards equipment. 2 different things. Okay.
Fundraising now for the Saks, we're going to use the same equipment that's there. Yep. East, they do have some equipment.
The drainage issue at East has been going on for years.
Yes. Although I think we've solved that for the most part. Yeah,
My question is,
Yeah.
if we're doing more drainage this year, is this the end of the correction of the issue?
we've spent some time about 7 years ago or so. We had hydrologists come in and
I know that.
yep, and they did quite a bit of good work with downspouts and others. And when we replaced the roof, we had them do some more work around that. So between those things, the drainage would be because they're wood chips now. So we need to make sure that we have the proper slope and drainage for the rubberized surface where the water actually, goes right through and goes out. So we have been, knock on wood, but we've been in a good place with that.
Question.
Yeah, go right ahead.
With all the years my kids were at the high school, I never actually saw anyone in that booth, in the security booth. With it being an open campus, is that a need? Do we need that?
They believe because it's an open campus, there's maybe even a greater need because we want the
Will they
kids to
stop
be.
people? Like, I'm not
They
sure
would.
how it'll work. So.
So
someone will be-
what we're looking at is a system where they could even scan with their IDs as they're coming and going. So we have
Unmanned or.
it is manned, but right now it can't really be manned in the winter or during the rain or other times because the booth is so old. It's needs to be replaced.
So when kids
So-
leave, they would scan, so there'd be a record of who's coming. and who's-
Looking at, yes. Yeah, that's something we could build into. Right now, you have no control over traffic. In the booth, it's an observation booth. If we move it to the center and maybe even have, arms that come up and down, we'll see what happens as we put it all together, that they could be a more active role. And that's really what we want. I mean, again, our campus monitors are so trained, that's something that ready to do on day one.
60,000 enough for that with arms and?
Oh, we should be in good place. Mhm.
Plus we have a little bit left over from the security appropriation.
That's right.
Is that refundable in any way or contributed by the state to increase security in the schools?
No, that's not part of the security grant, although we're optimistic that there may be some funding that could be available in the around school security and maybe for a portion of what we're talking about for the audio enhancement piece. But that's premature because they're just starting to have that conversation a little bit. But if that were to come through, I'm hopeful that at least we'd be eligible to apply for a portion of those costs being defrayed.
Questions on capital? Can we, can Tigers, exactly, too many of these things. Can Tigers people do any of our stuff that's listed in the capital? Is anything that his department can handle? And then the second question in 27 subparts is, I see a line item for service contracts of $600,000 in facilities. Is there any way we can stuff any of what's in your capital, like small things like these door sweeps and things of that nature? Like any way? I don't know what the service contracts are for 600 grand a year, and I'm just wondering as I look at the items in the capital, which there's some stuff like a PA system is a big deal and some other stuff, but when I see like 12 grand for reorient closet, I'm like, well, maybe there's a way we can kind of shift that, or maybe not. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Do
that
some
Tigers
work.
Department has asked.
Well, we don't know. That's why I'm asking. And also the service contracts. Do they do anything like that? If they don't, maybe our janitorial can do something. Maybe they can't. That's why I'm asking.
Right. So I will on the Tigers piece, and I'll let Shauna answer about this specific budget, but we work in partnership with them all the time. You may see the guardrails that have gone up recently over at South and over at East, and those are the same type of guardrails that are over at Waveney. It's steel reinforced. It's control. We've been doing that in partnership with them to make sure that there's that commonality, and they're great partners with us. So anytime we're doing something like that, we always reach out to them, talk, and they're always a part of that whole process. Sometimes they do some of the work. They help out with the playground. In the beginning of the year, they'll pull up the chips, put down new chips, and help us out with some of those things in some of those areas. So yeah, there's a good partnership there, and it helps. So anything you see here is assuming that would continue because we know that it will.
So I just want to be clear. It would be great to know if there's anything in here listed in your capital that either could be covered by DPW or again, and I just don't know the nature of these service contracts listed in the facilities section. I don't know. Maybe there's something there or not. I'm asking again.
HVAC related, if it's not, over the top, we do have an HVAC person who's excellent. And he does handle stuff that previously was handled by an HVAC company.
On the facilities contracts, those, without having the detail right here, I can tell you we did squeeze those down. They came in higher from our facilities department. We said we need to squeeze those down further. Those contracts have gone up quite a bit over the last couple of years. That's sort of the higher level of support for our things. So our guys do a lot of that work in-house whenever they can. But each one of that number is arrived at by really going through each of the existing contracts that we have. So I don't think there's room in that. I'll make sure I can go through it again, but I do remember sitting with Scott and Sean and squeezing it down because it was a higher number. We just said we've got to figure out a way to offload more of that in-house and try to, every time you do it, increase risk a little bit. But
it's a little specific about a couple examples of what the services would be covered under those contracts.
Yeah, that is the coolers over at the high school, the two large air AC system that we have, those two huge towers. I believe that there's Johnson's Controls is a group that we use through that.
The chillers.
That's the chillers that we have.
Also cleaning hoods in cafeterias. We contract that out as well.
So we do the level one service where we can, but some of these things. So each of those towers is $80, $100, whatever, $1,000, and we have contracts to help us with some of that.
Well, one point on that, and I appreciate your answer. It's helpful. Again, as we consider potentially some type of reduction or not, like I said, I was just looking, that's why I'm looking at areas that have nothing to do with programming, teachers, certified, non-certified. putting that aside, that was just a comment. Only because this number's been out there and it's an issue, and I really would love to hear about it. There's something about the health insurance and this $31 million issue. I know that's been addressed. Eric, was that discussed in your meeting? I think it's important to set the record straight, so there's no misunderstanding or confusion about that. So if you wouldn't mind addressing that issue, that'd be appreciated.
Sure. And again, at the risk of speaking beyond my expertise, but we do closely manage the insurance plan. And one of the any challenge, so as a self-managed plan, right, we hold the funding for that. And when there's a bill that comes from a doctor or hospital, anywhere else, prescription, that literally gets paid directly out of our budget, out of our fund, right? That's the internal services fund that we're always talking about. And we create our budget, we develop our anticipated expense, what do we anticipate that our medical costs are going to be, and that's exactly what we budget for. If we come out ahead the year before, we're able to use some of that savings to bring down that cost a little bit and lower the budget number. If we come out having to use some of the reserve the year before, then it might be a little bit more than that as we try to make that whole. I'm oversimplifying a little bit. But that as a self-managed plan, right, that the fund pays those bills, and we, again, contract with Cigna to the tune of about $500,000 a year. For them to be the administrators of the plan, and for us to be able to use all of the agreements that they have with all of the service providers. So that's all that they make, right? And this year, actually, we're getting more in our RX rebates than we pay Cigna for the year, right? So we're net positive even on just those two pieces. It's impossible to compare what we do to a district that's on a fully insured plan. So when you're on a fully insured plan, you get a bill from the insurer that you pay, whether once or each month or however it works, and they hold the money, they pay the bills. And if they come out ahead, they keep that money. And if they come out behind, they take that loss. At the highest level, there's just sort of understanding how these two things work. Since we're essentially serving as the insurance company by holding all of those funds, we come out ahead some years, come out behind some years, but on the whole, year by year over time, you're going to come out ahead. As an insurance company, they're the same thing. They might come out ahead or behind for your time, but they're going to come out ahead. But for them coming out ahead, that's your money that they're making. We keep that money. So to compare those two, and what you're comparing is what our actuals versus what an insurance company is sending as the bill. Now, an insurance company is going to build in margin. They're going to find other ways to ensure they wouldn't be in business very long if they took a loss every single year, right? So there's going to be ups and downs, but on the whole, you're best off having a self-insured plan for that, if you can, for that reason. They're not easy to get started because you have to have a reserve. You have to figure out your levels of risk with your stop loss and all the other dimensions that go into that. We did share with Eric, I didn't make it for everybody. We did have an exhibit a couple of years ago that shows how we have managed this plan. And through the management of the plan, we've saved in excess of $15 million over the last 8-9 years. Part of that has been the migration out of a PPO into the HSA for all of our employees. Some of that's been our retiree management and transitioning them off of our plan into the Teachers Retirement Board plan and others. Some of that's also been the negotiation with Cigna and others to get 100% of our prescription rebate back, which may be what goes back to the insurer in a fully insured plan. It's part of their profit, right? But for us, we get that back 100%, and that helps to offset those costs. So they're very different mechanisms, but our self-insured plan has run quite well. I think the best example of sort of that difference between fully insured, self-insured is COVID, going back to those years. When everything shut down in March of 2020, right through until the summer, people stopped going to the doctors, people stopped using the health insurance, right? Nobody did. So for us, our account that year was over $2 million to the good. To a fully insured district, their insurer's account was over $2 million to the good from their money, right? So that's an extreme example, but it just shows why being fully insured makes more sense. Now, we do analyze this. We look at it regularly, talk with our peers. They most aspire to be fully insured if they're not, because of what we're talking about, but it is a difficult position to get to. And some are quite happy being fully insured because they get a bill each year and they pay the bill, and the risk and the management and all of the other pieces are managed elsewhere, and that's okay. We've made a commitment to this, and that's why we do what we do. But again, if you're comparing the bill that's sent from an insurance company to the actual expenditures that we have, those are not like, those are different. So yeah, again, our plan comes out ahead sometimes, not ahead other times, but there's data that shows over time. As a matter of fact, I do have the page, but I won't go through all the details. But we've got the data that shows that through careful management and structure and the way that we're running our plan, we are coming out as a last piece. Since 2012, 13, again, trying to do some historical, because that's been the interest this year, looked at our growth in our claims from that year, anticipated claims that year, to where we are next year. 3.9% average annual growth. It's below market. It'd be hard to beat.
I've got another answer, which I think, give myself a little credit, I think is very compelling. It's very simple. We're projecting 18,190,000 of claims for this budget year that we're discussing. The whole premise of this 31 million conclusion by the resident that's been writing us is that if we just took that 18,190,000 and put it out to bid under a fully insured contract, we'd save a ton of money. And so Darien pays a premium of 16 million and change. So the premise of that gentleman's argument is that if we just went out to the insurance market, we could convince them to take on the risk of $18 million plus fluctuation on the upside, that they would give us that deal for $16 million. Now that ain't gonna happen in any business that I've ever heard of in America that didn't go bankrupt. That is not an option. We have $18 million of claims. We can't become Darien and use their insurance. And if you take that assumption out of the product, his whole model falls apart. It's just.
Well, thank you for that, Tom, because that's exactly right. Those are the projected claims. It's based on 12 months of experience. This modeling that goes through, it's created by our consultant, Joe. It's vetted by the insurer, and then it's vetted again by our aggregate stop loss vendor that we go out to bid on, because that is the attachment point for the aggregate stop loss. That's a very important number. That's vetted multiple times. And any insurance company that looks at our 12 months of historical claims is going to have a number at or very, very near that 18 million.
Risk plus profit. But the other thing is, if you look at Fortune 1,000 companies or Fortune 5,000 companies, virtually every one of them is self-insured.
Yeah, so I was just gonna comment.
Everyone. So to say that we're screwing our taxpayers because we're not going fully insured, that defies business logic.
It makes no sense. Many of you know I'm in financial services. I talk to actuaries on a regular basis. You're absolutely right. Anybody who can self-insure will. It's an absolute no-brainer. There's nobody in financial services that would argue against that. So the resident you're talking about, I see those emails, and I'm like, it's basic math. Like, ask anybody with a brain in financial services. You would always self-insure if you can, but it requires a tremendous amount of thought, maintenance, but you save a ton of money if you just like bringing all the stuff in-house that we've done. Like, and it's funny, for 4 years before me, this conversation had come up, and it's every single year for the 4 years that I've been here, and I'm sure
I warned you.
For the next 4 years, if I decide to run again, it'll keep it going up. But like, believe me, we've all looked at this as well. And my own organization I work for, it's a Fortune 100 company. And because of some legislative change, we ended up having to go there forever. They were self-insured. And I shared this with Brian. We had Blue Cross Blue Shield. Nothing changed about our insurance. We had to go from self-insured to fully insured. All of our premiums doubled, straight doubled. Same exact coverage. My wife doesn't understand because she's like, I don't get it. I have to cut a check every time I go to the doctor or high deductible plan. It makes sense. But our premiums, she doesn't know because I haven't told her that I'm actually paying twice as much for that same garbage. So this is a absolute home run.
She knows now.
No way she's watching this long. I mean, if you're listening, go to bed.
Yeah. The other implication that our resident has raised is that, well, it would be harmless for you to just put your plan out to bid, find out what the insurance companies want to do. And my response to that is, we have better things to do than to engage in a folly of going through a bidding process when we can absolutely predict to a 99% certainly, they're not going to give us a number we want.
No, and it's so much, believe me, it'd be a lot easier if we just, sometimes I'm just like, why don't we just do it? Let's, let's piss everybody off
know.
and just bid it out.
It's
and
tempting to just
but the problem
insure
is you
just-
can't get it back.
Right.
We won't be able to get it back. So be careful what you wish for. We can go fully insured. We will never come back. It just doesn't work that way. So anyway.
Well, and the disruption to our employees, to their utilization, their doctors, their schedules, everything that they're doing. We do go out to bid every year in our stop loss, because that's the number that can fluctuate. And we find some good savings there. We do that, again, to the point around collaboration with the town. We do that together with the town. We pool together, we go out, we find a stop loss vendor for both our aggregate and our individual. Now, one of the things we do with our aggregate is make sure that it's 20%, which is a challenge, and that there's no limit. And that's what we do in order, because of the statute that places liability on the individual Board of Ed members, we make sure that they're covered. So that's one of the things we do for them. I want to make sure they can sleep at night.
Hold on.
From the perspective, if I'm let's say I'm a teacher in the school system and I'm free to choose any doctor I want for any service, or do I?
No, you work through the Cigna
Okay.
system. So the Cigna agreement, so there's an in-network, there's an out-of-network, the pharmacy agreements, all of those things work through Cigna.
And there are agreed
as the
upon
administrator.
prices for all those different services. And if I have a claim through one of the in-network providers, I basically get it fully covered.
Well, as an HSA, right, it
Yeah.
depends upon where you are with reaching your deductibles and your out-of-pocket maximums and different pieces to that. But correct, that we use, that's the role that Cigna plays for us as the administrator of our plan. Correct. Yep.
I was just gonna say, I don't necessarily see the harm in going, bidding it out maybe once every 8 years or something, just to, be sure and it sounds like it's a better deal maybe for the employees. They probably don't want to change, but for the
We do an
taxpayer,
analysis
maybe it
regularly.
would be a
Mhm.
good, point of information.
Unionized workforce, you have formularies with the companies that bid out. So you're not only dealing with, bidding out the healthcare, but you're also, it could create big disruptions in
That's true.
workforce, because each company provides a different formulary that they'll provide to the workforce. So
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, we do every so often ask Joe to do an analysis, to reach out and to see what those costs would be, and to see, even a few years ago, we looked at some different hybrid models. Is there a way that you could do a mix between self-insured and fully insured, and trying to be as creative as we can, because we know the insurance marketplace is a challenge, right? But then we do also look back at our historical trend and see we've been trending below the market. So we want to be careful in decisions we make, because where we are now is a result of good decisions we've made throughout the way. So things like where our individual stop loss is, the aggregate stop loss I just mentioned, other things, those are all sort of decisions you make around risk tolerance and plan design that we're solid with. But we have looked at what would the cost be, or what might savings be if we went fully insured, and it wasn't there. And I can find those.
Not an
old-
official bid, it's just Joe does a study on what's out there and.
reaches out to, I mean, he has a network of folks. He works with districts across the state. Some use Cigna, some use Anthem, some use, Aetna. They use all, so he has relationships with all of those, and he's able to develop some reports for us and take a look for us. And he's, been with us for long enough now.
Any other questions on wonderful world of self-insured versus fully insured? Okay, so.
You don't convince people in these discussions, you
Yeah.
wear them down.
I think it took me like 2 years to just understand it.
Fuming.
Rita, go, I'm sorry, Rita, you have a question,
Oh,
comment?
no, sorry. I just want to say, it literally, it took me like 2 years just to like understand it, to be honest.
Well played. Okay. So it's 9:07. Well, this was scheduled for 30 minutes, so which is fine, which is totally fine. I mean, this is the big.
Appropriate. It was appropriate timing.
Healthy discussion.
This is what I suggest. Obviously, I want you all to weigh in and tell me, what you think. And I appreciate Hillary getting into the question of, let's just get to brass tacks. What are we thinking in terms of, what are some people thinking in terms of the potential reduction? If there is a number or there's not a number, if we're coalescing around some type of a number. This discussion was enormously helpful. I think it would be appropriate if Thursday, since we have EMS, OEM, fire and police, which should be fairly short. I think for town council, I think we should have anyone who's interested in making a proposed reduction to any department we've had a discussion with already, I think should be prepared to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Here's a motion. We could at least have that discussion because then that gives us an opportunity on the following Tuesday, which is our public hearing. So we could have a public hearing and further discussion on any motions that were made, or at least whether we want to call them motions or
Even a proposal.
proposal, that's the one. So a type of proposal, so everyone knows in advance of a public hearing that we're going to discuss a potential reduction. And then we have the following Thursday will be the vote. So I think that should be enough time. I mean, is everyone okay with that? I don't want to hear someone say, you stink and that was terrible. So I want to, Patty, go ahead.
I think given the number of letters that we have all received and a lot of them making some very good points for all of us to be, considering, I want the public to understand that we are not coming into the budget season with a mindset that we're going to cut. We have a responsibility to really keep a handle on what the increase is in our budgets, different sections are. And so that's what we all are considering, is how we put some balance on what is essential to provide, what is nice to have in provision of services. But we're not in there with a mindset of we're just going to slash. And we certainly respect all of our department heads. And I mean, sitting here listening to you guys, I don't know how you keep all that in your heads, and presented in a very professional, very knowledgeable manner. And those are the kinds of things that we didn't then put in our heads, to be making our decisions. So I thank all of the department heads and you guys in the past 2 days for yeoman duty. But I think the public needs to know that we are not just coming into this, for cutting, for maintaining the increase.
Thank you, Penny. So we're okay with that process, right? We're okay, everybody? Tom, you okay? All right, bud.
When's the vote again? So the vote is which day?
Thursday.
Thursday, we have a Thursday meeting.
The
which would
date
be
though, I'm
March.
sorry, the date is Thursday.
March 27, Thursday. The vote is a week later, April 3.
April 3rd. Okay, thank you.
Public hearing is next Tuesday.
You wanted to propose.
Public hearing April 1st.
Next meeting's the
Yeah.
27th, then the
Yes,
1st. and then the
this
3rd.
Thursday, be prepared to have a proposal about any department and a potential reduction. So we at least know about everyone, it'll be out in the public, they'll be aware of it. Then we'll come on the following Tuesday for a public hearing and discussion. And then we have another session, which is our final vote in 2 Thursdays. So that should give us enough time to have our discussions and everyone knows ahead of time, right?
And everyone's aware, agreement, that's the process, right?
Right, yes. All right, sounds like everyone's okay. So decedents by omission. So there we go. Very good. Can we get a motion? Penny moved. Kim second. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.